Hey guys, it's Mr. Mini Painter, and today I'm going to show you how I painted Frealaf Hildeson, one of the War of the Rohirrim miniatures issued by Games Workshop. It's one of the set of three, actually six, they're on foot and mounted characters that are amongst the new releases of Games Workshop. I'm going to show you how I painted him. So to start off, I primed my models with a light gray primer and used some modeling sand on the base. Now if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to my channel while you're at it, and give a like and a comment to this video. Now I'm going to show you how I painted both miniatures, starting with this standing version, and afterwards of course I'm going to show you how the mounted one. So to start off with the base colors, Bugman's Glow for the face. There is not a lot of skin showing, it's just a face on this mini. Make sure you give it a good coverage before continuing to the next step. Second layer is Kislev Flesh. I'm starting off bright right away. I'm covering about 80% of the model, as you can see here, so leave some shade, some darkness in the below his chin, his neck, the sides of his nose, his eye sockets, and the rest will be quite bright. And we're going to be highlighting that a little bit more by adding some Palette Witch flesh to the Kislev Flesh. This time we're decreasing the area that we're painting and sticking to the top of the nose, the eyebrows, the top cheekbones, etc. Then with some pure Palette Witch flesh, I'm painting in the eyes, leaving some dark around it, which really defines the eye. This is the part where I mess up most of the times. Abaddon Black for the pupil. Now if you mess up here, then you can try and fix it by adding some Bugman's Glow or whatever you used as a first color to correct it. For the hair, I mixed some dried bark with Corvus Black to create a matte black brownish look. Once dry, I mixed some Administratum Grey into the dried bark because he has some silvery grey highlights in his hair on the box art, and I wanted to try and achieve that. So I'm just picking out some hairs here and there, focusing mainly on the top of his head and some of those, pick out some of those hairs. I'm adding some extra Administratum Grey into the mix and focusing on a smaller area, so just the top of the head and the front hairs. So you get a nice transition from bright to dark. And that's it for the hair. We're now continuing on the clothing. Corvus Black I'm using for... There was a lot of black areas here on his armor, on his boots, on the pieces of his shoulder pads here. I'm gonna show you in the end what the result looks like. But I'm picking out all those black areas with this matte grayish black Corvus Black. Now in the end you should have something like this. So I picked the pants with this color, shoulder pads, wrist pads, the leg plates. Alright, now before continuing on that, I'm gonna pick out the base colors of the rest first by using Vulcan Green for the greens on this miniature. The side panels on his coat are this same color. And again, while painting this one, I'm also painting the miniature on the horse, so the mounted version. And I'm going to show you in the end, we're going to continue on the horse, but of course he has the exact same colors as the standing model. Now for the grays, I'm using gray sear, which was in my case the same as my base color, so very little job here, but I kind of messed up with the green at some tiny points, so I was able to make it a fine distinctive line between those two colors. Next I'm using Ushabti bone for the yellows on his coat, and also the boots. So there are some panels here on the front. The boots are in the same color, because why wouldn't you wear yellow boots, right? Then Rhinox hide as a base color on the sword scabbard. And also the belts on the back of his boots. And also the belt around his waist. Then for the gold parts, I'm using Auric Armor Gold. I'm using two separate gold colors in this miniature because I wanted to have some differences there, and I think it's visible in the box art. I'm not really sure, but that's at least what I made of it. So there's Auric Armor Gold on the hilt of the sword, the chest piece, the scabbard. But I'm using a different gold color on the armor and the armor plates actually. Now there's this tiny gold rim on his coat, which I'm also using this gold color for. Some tiny details here below his chest. The top of the rim of his suit over here, which is extremely tiny, but you can manage when holding your brush sideways. It's always an easy way to paint fine, very thin lines. Just hold your brush sideways and use the sharpness of the shape you're painting. So I'm picking out these lines here as well. Don't forget the part on his back. And then we're moving on to the next gold color, for which I'm using Liberator Gold. It's kind of a brighter variant of gold, and with this I'm painting all the armor pieces. So the armor piece on his lower arms, the shoulder pads, and the leg armor. There are some lines there. It's a quite time-consuming job. This it took my fair piece of time painting this, but the result is very nice, of course. Lead belcher for the blade. And then we're nearly done with all the base colors. Time for shading, and I'm using Raglan Flesh Shade on the gold parts that we painted before. Make sure that there are no puddles left at any point, so spread your paint around with your brush. I'm using Null Oil on the sword. And Apothecary White on the grey parts of his coat. I like Apothecary White more than Null Oil for these bright parts, because Null Oil tends to be a bit strong on bright areas, and this Apothecary White is kind of a subtle grey shade. Now to highlight those grey panels, I'm using the primary color Grey Sear again, and paint in some lines on the raised areas. You can take that a step further by adding some white, but I wanted it to remain grayish. And the highlight on the Apothecary White works very nice. On the greens, I'm using Nurgling Green as a highlight color, and try and follow the lines I painted before with the white. So that way you get a nice even flow from folds all across the coat. following the whites into the greens. Then with some canoptic alloy, I'm painting some glimmering details on the plate parts, the golden parts that is. So on his boots, his arms and shoulders. We're using Baneblade Brown to give an edge highlight to all the browns we painted before. So the belt, the scabbard, and the straps around his legs. If you're able, it's nice to have a bottom and top highlight, but it all depends on how confident you are with your brush. Now I'm painting the boots with some diluted Seraphim sepia, so just add some water there and you give it that nice thinned down orangey shade. You can go over the browns if you want, it kind of blends the colors together. Then with some Mechanicus Standard Grey, I am adding some tiny details to the black armor we painted before. So you can add some highlights here and there, especially to the pants because they have some creases, of course. But you can do some highlights, some shininess to the armor plates as well. I'm taking it a bit still, one step further with some Dawnstone. And the last part is the base. I'm painting with Garagak's Sewer. I really love this color. It gives a nice sandy look to the base. You can add whatever foliage or rocks or whatever you want, of course. Tiny detail I added later on is Screaming Skull as a highlight to the boots, to the yellow. I think it was just adds a little bit of definition, extra definition to the boots and brightens it up just a little bit because the Seraphim sepia I found a little bit too strong in my case. And the last detail we're going to be painting is the sharpness of the sword, and for that I'm using Stormhost Silver and focusing only on the edges of the sword. Hold your brush sideways like this and just makes you able to focus on the very edges of the sword. And next we're going to be moving on with the mounted version, which I have painted in the exact same colors as we did before, so that's exactly the same. And we're going to continue with the horse itself. And for that I'm using a base color of XV88, or any bright brown you have. I like it to be a little bit orangey colored. So it's going to be this golden brown horse. Now once I was done with the skin tone of the horse, is it a skin tone? I don't really know. I'm using Bugman's Glow on the hair and manes of the horse. Because it's kind of an anime horse, you can use some slightly different colors than would be natural to horses maybe. So it's kind of fun to use some different colors here and there. I'm using Abaddon Black on the hooves. And they have some horseshoes beneath them, so we're going to be painting them later on. Now all of these straps on the horse I painted with dried bark. There is a lot of it going around his back, on below the saddle, in front over here, and of course the piece on his head. Next we're going to be adding some brightness to the lower part of the legs of the horse. I wanted some color differences, and for that I'm using Karak Stone and kind of paint it as if it were tiny loose hairs, which it actually is. So that way you get some nice details in there, some fine tips, which gives a nice transition. Now for the gold part I'm using Liberator Gold again. So there is a lot of buckles on his belt. Just pick him out carefully. Next we're going to be shading the hair with some Raglan flesh shade. And at this point you can also take the gold parts as well. I'm using some Agrax Earthshade on the body of the horse as a shade. Don't go too strong here. And next I'm using Mephiston Red on the inner part of the saddle. It's like a blanket, I guess, with bright red and some white fringes and white woolly ends on the side. In the meanwhile, the hair has been able to dry, and I'm highlighting it with some Cadian Flesh Tone, which is a nice transition from the Bugman's Glow we did before. It's the same transition as we used in the face, or at least in a lot of faces I paint. It's a nice natural flow from there. And with a light dry brush I'm adding some Palette Witch flesh to the very tips. You don't want to overdo it, you don't want it to be white, you want it to be a brighter variant of the salmon color we painted before. Apothecary White I used on the woolen part of the saddle blanket. Again, I'm using Apothecary White rather instead of Nuln Oil because I think that's a bit too strong. I used Retributor Armor on the stirrups. And of course the horseshoes with some Leadbelcher. Next I am dry brushing the wool with some white scar, just to add some tiny white details to the very top. And then for the horse itself, I'm highlighting that with a mixture of XV88, the base color, and some Carrick Stone. You can do it in 2 or 3 steps if you want, focusing on the edges of course and all the top parts of the horse which would normally see the most light, so it would be most reflective. And that's basically how highlights work. So you pick out those muscle areas, those raised areas. You can thin down your paint just a little bit if you want to have a transition from dark to bright, and make sure to pull the paint towards the brightest part. Next, with some pure Carrick Stone, I'm adding some extreme highlights, focusing on the front of the lip and the nose here. Just to pick it out a little bit more. Then with some Black Templar, I'm painting in the eyes. I'm using Black Templar rather than black because it gives a kind of shine and a little bit of transparency on the white that I left in the eye sockets before. And then some Baneblade Brown I used for edge highlighting all the parts of the straps and saddle. There is a lot of brown here and a lot of edges. The straps I always like to paint top and bottom, which takes a lot of time, but the result is very nice. Same goes for the saddle part. Focus on the front and the visual parts that would reflect the most light. And it also adds to have some extra details in there. So the reins, top and bottom. Now if you have gone a little bit too far highlighting, just pick up your Rhinox hide again and add a fine line in the middle. That always works. Then his head piece, his head armor, I don't know what you want to call it. I painted with some lead belcher. I wanted to have a metal detail in there. Which I then painted with an edge highlight of Stormhost silver. Finally, some Canoptic alloy on the gold parts, add some shine to it. So highlight that as well, which gives it a little subtle glow. I used the same color on the stirrups. And there's our finished Frealaf Hildeson, nephew of Helm Hammerhand, and he looks amazing. I love the colors on these minis. I love those new minis actually. Now if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to my channel and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And let me know if you want any other models painted. Also, please follow me on my Patreon page where I'll be making a lot more videos for a lot more different games. So I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!